Hey, y'all, each week on The Sam Sanders Show from KCRW, we ask big questions and share hot takes about the pop culture we love.
Now that we have YouTube, we don't need any more biopics. If they've been alive such that I can watch them on YouTube, I don't need it.
I don't think that music is getting worse. I think y'all just don't listen to artists who aren't in the mainstream.
Taylor Swift, retire. It's time to retire.
The Sam Sanders Show from KCRW, wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube.
My wife bumped into someone and caused a small amount of damage to his car. And I made him feel bad about that because of Hurricane Katrina. Like, that's not fair. He has nothing to do with Hurricane Katrina.
This is Life in 7 Songs from the San Francisco Standard. I'm Sophie Behrman. My guest this week is Michael Schur. If you've laughed at a TV show in the last, say, 20 years, you probably have him to thank. Mike was a writer on SNL and The Office, on which he also played the fan-favorite character of Mose Schrute. He's a mastermind behind shows like Parks and Rec, The Good Place, and A Man on the Inside, the second season of which comes out on Netflix this Thursday. Mike is one of the funniest writers out there, but his shows are not just about big laughs. They tackle uncomfortable questions too. What makes a good person? How do we face aging and loss? What do we owe each other? At a time when sincerity can feel uncool, Mike's work proves that caring deeply about ethics, about the world, about each other, can actually be the funniest thing of all. Mike Schur, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I have to say, you were the fastest yes that we've ever gotten, I think.
Is that true?
Yeah, I think I emailed David. He forwarded it to you, and 13 minutes later, he...
Yeah, well, he sent it to me and said, I think this is cool. And he rarely says things like that. So I looked at it and was like, this is cool. I'd love to do
Nice.
this.
You told us that each of your 7 songs in some way informed the way you write or moved along the path to becoming a writer, which is why I love that your first song is Weird Al's Eat It.
Yeah.
Do you remember the moment you first heard this song?
For people my age, in the comedy world, I'm saying, we can talk about where we first heard Weird Al the way that I think our parents talked about the moon landing. You remember details. You're like, I was in my car, I was driving on the, or like my older brother played it or whatever. And I heard it on the radio. I was about 8 years old, and I, recognized it as Beat It.
You better run, you better do what you can. Don't wanna see no blood, don't be a man.
And then the words were different, and the voice was different, and I realized that it was a person being funny.
How come you're always such a fussy young man? Don't want no Captain Crunch, don't want no Raisin Bran. Well, don't you know that other kids are starving in Japan, so eat it.
He chooses Japan there, which is not a place where I think a lot of people were starving, but it's okay. You let him get away with it. It's a perfect song. It really sort of cracked my world open in a meaningful way. Like, I didn't know adults were allowed to be funny. I didn't know the radio was allowed to be funny. It didn't make sense. And I remember thinking, like, I need to understand this. I need to know what this is. And it was the first record I ever bought. My mom gave me $2, and I went to Record Express in West Hartford, Connecticut, and I bought the 45 of that song, and I listened to it 10,000 times, and it really sort of changed my life. You can draw a straight line from me hearing Eat It for the first time to me starting to learn about comedy. There's no single song that I think is more meaningful to me in my life than Eat It, which is a hilarious thing to say.
So tell me a little bit more about your childhood. Where were you raised? What was kid life like for you?
I was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was raised in suburban Connecticut. I think that generally speaking, this is a very broad brush here, but humor generally comes from either pain or suburban boredom. Like pain is people who were oppressed and overlooked and treated badly and use humor as a way to fight back. And suburban boredom is self-explanatory. And so my comedy interest came directly from suburban boredom. There wasn't a lot to rebel against or that was causing friction in my life. My parents got divorced when I was 9. So it wasn't like it was totally smooth sailing for us, for me and my 2 sisters, but I never felt truly unsafe in any real way. And so I was sort of left to my own devices and discovered comedy and then just knew that's what I loved. So I just devoured it. Once Weird Al cracked open that part of my brain, it was just like, where is there more of this? How do I get more of it? I just wanted comedy everywhere. I wanted everything to be funny. I wanted to be around funny people. I wanted to read funny books and watch funny movies. I remember I saw Airplane. I saw it at a sleepover when I was maybe 9 or something. We watched Airplane and Airplane 2. And I would just like, I don't want to go to bed. I just want to watch them again. I just want more.
Is it true, though, that you were only allowed to watch 1 hour of television a week as a kid?
Yeah. For most of my childhood, it was in 1 hour a week. So we had to pick very carefully. We would get the TV guide and I would like go through with a pen and read descriptions of shows and be like, okay, Growing Pains or Silver Spoons, which one do I want to watch this week? And the real problem when I was a kid is that Dukes of Hazzard was 1 hour long. That was my favorite show. But then that's your whole week, right?
You're out.
You're out, you're done. So I eventually stopped watching any drama because it was better for me to choose 2 half-hour shows. So I would divvy them up carefully and try to pick the ones that I thought were going to be the best use of my time.
Oh, gosh, already thinking about trade-offs and sort of weighing.
Yeah. It was a life or death for me. Like if I choose wrong, if it's a bad episode, I've blown the whole week, you know?
So your next song is A Day in the Life by the Beatles. What was it about this song that stuck with you?
So I was given Rubber Soul as a Christmas present, I think by my Uncle Jeff when I was like 7 or 8. And I had a Walkman and I would just listen to it over and over again on the Walkman until the batteries died. And I loved the early songs. I loved, I Want to Hold Your Hand and Love Me Do and whatever. Mm-hmm. But I heard Sgt. Pepper for the first time and it really I remember feeling like my brain was leveling up because that entire album is like the soundtrack to a musical that you haven't seen. And I found myself wanting to understand the story that was behind the music. And of course, there wasn't one. But I started filling in the blanks. I was like, okay, this guy, he goes on a date with someone named Rita, who's a meter maid. I don't know what that really means, but I can kind of guess. And then there's that story, she's leaving home. Okay, now that's his sister, and she's running away with this guy. And I was like putting it all together. And then you get to the end of that album, and A Day in the Life it's the grand finale.
He blew his mind out in a car. He didn't notice that the lights had changed. A crowd of people stood and stared.
It's really heavy, It's like for a kid, it's like he's talking about people dying in car crashes and maybe via suicide.
Yeah.
And because it's British, it has this element of mystery to it where you're like, what's Blackburn, Lancashire? I just remember it felt like a treasure hunt. It felt like a mystery that I had to solve. It's like this epic song told from 2 different points of view where one of the singers, John, is like, he's really like philosophical and sort of, he's very sad and like his world is confusing and he's reading the paper and all these sad things are happening. And then Paul pops in and he's just like, gotta go, gotta get to my job, gotta run around, gotta do my, he has a completely different view of the world. And I started imagining these 2 people moving through the world. It was like the first time that I felt like music was telling me a story that I had to try to understand. And so given that my whole life has now been devoted to writing, I think at some level that was like an early moment where I understood the power of like telling a story in a way that was compelling to people.
Your next song brings us to your high school years. It's Kid Fears by the Indigo Girls. Why'd you pick this one?
Now I'm 14, 15, something like that. And, the first song on their first album is Closer to Fine. And again, if you're my age, you know all the words to that song. You can sing it from beginning to end at the drop of a hat. If you played it right now, I would sing every line. But Kid Fears, I think, is the second or third song on the album. And this is when I really started listening to lyrics, I would say. And that song is so haunting and beautiful to me because it is about a person basically saying that they would trade all of the fears that they have as an adult for the ones they had as a kid, which are more innocent. And like that's how you feel when you're 14 or 15 and you're starting to understand the world and how scary it is. I remember just thinking like, yeah, let me go back to when I was 7 and my biggest fear was that we would run out of ice cream or that the Red Sox would lose or something. It's the song that made me understand that I was already in the process of losing my childlike innocence. And it's also just a beautiful song.
Are you on fire? From the years.
Their harmonies are so beautiful too.
So beautiful.
I mark that song and understanding that song as the sort of liminal space between childhood and adulthood for me. Like that song represents the moment when I kind of clicked over and started understanding that the problems that I would have and that the world would have were a lot bigger than the ones that I felt were the problems when I was, 8 or 9 or something.
So I want to fast forward a bit to 1998. You'd just graduated from college and almost immediately you got a job as a writer on Saturday Night Live, which obviously is a huge deal. I imagine that would be a dream come true for almost any comedy writer.
Right.
But I understand it wasn't a dream come true for you. What was going on?
So I was very bad at SNL from the first year and a half, let's say. And I'm not looking for I'm sure you were great. I wasn't. I promise.
I believe you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sophie. And I think the reason I was bad was I was in over my head. I started right after my 22nd birthday and had no idea what I was doing. And also because I was very concerned about whether the people that I admired liked what I was doing. And as a result, what I was doing was mostly imitating them. And it did not go well. And I was not happy. But I was 22 and I was working at Saturday Night Live. And so it was not a thought that entered my brain that I could potentially be unhappy. I couldn't allow that possibility. And I remember one day I was walking to work and I was crossing 50th Street heading to 30 Rock. I stepped into the street and it was like a bolt of lightning hit me. And the bolt of lightning was like, you're not happy. You don't like your job. And it was such a relief to be able to admit that to myself. Now, not surprisingly, this happened very shortly after I started going to therapy.
That can help.
Yeah, it really can. Please, everyone, go to therapy. Please. And it was such a weight off my shoulders to admit that I wasn't happy. I was not in a creative mindset at all. I was too stressed out. I was too scared of getting fired. And as soon as I had that thought, I got better as a writer because I stopped worrying about whether people thought that I was cool or funny. And I just started writing things that I thought were funny. And I sort of put them out there and said, like, here it is. Tell me what you think. And if you don't like it, that's okay. I'll write something else.
And you shared a song that kind of played a role in this realization. It's Ghost by Neutral Milk Hotel from their album In the Airplane Over the Sea. This came out in February of 1998, so right after you'd started at SNL. How did this album play into this kind of turning point in your career?
The feeling that I got when I listened to this album, which is so holistic and so perfectly created, and it flows so beautifully, is like something inspired him incredibly deeply and meaningfully. So one of the songs, I think it's Oh Comely, he finishes the song, and if you turn up the volume really loudly, you can hear the sound engineer in the other room go, holy shit. And that is a thing that I remember listening to it with headphones and being like, wait, what just happened? And I rewound it and played it over again. And that is the feeling that this entire album gave me, was like, oh my God, like I didn't know a single person could create something this beautiful and intense and haunting and wonderful. And I loved it. And then a friend of mine was like, that whole album is about Anne Frank. And it was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? He wrote
I'm just finding this out.
Is that true?
Thanks to you. Yeah. So, thank you.
The legend is that Jeff Mangum read the Diary of Anne Frank and then wrote this entire album about Anne Frank. Once you listen to it knowing that, it takes on an entirely new dimension. So this song is my favorite song on the album. It's the one that stays with me the most.
I know that she will live forever. She won't ever die. She goes, and now she knows she'll never be afraid.
He's he's absolutely laying out as hard as he can creatively and artistically in every vocal delivery and every strum of the guitar. It's like, this is important. I have to communicate to you what I'm feeling, and I have to tell the stories that I'm telling. And that is aspirational to me. It's like I've thought many times, I hope that someday I write something that's this good.
You said this album made you realize that in writing, feeling things is better than thinking them.
I think I was very in my head about writing. I was very concerned with whether people thought I was doing something cool as opposed to doing something good. And being cool is the opposite of creativity. David Foster Wallace talks about this, about how like the worst enemy of writing is being cool. If people are trying to be cool, that means they're too concerned with how they come across or what people might think of you. And this album is a great example of like, he's like, I don't care what you think about this. I have to express this feeling that I have. I don't know if anyone's going to care or anyone's going to hear me, but I'm going to say what I feel. And I think that was getting out of my head and into my heart was a huge moment in my professional life and also, honestly, my personal life. Like it made everything about my life better. And I associate this album in particular with like, this is not an album of a guy who's in his head. This is an album of a guy who's like, I'm going to expose my heart to the world. And that was very meaningful to me.
What did it do for your personal life?
It led me to get married to my wife directly. Like, honestly, I didn't have a ton of healthy models for relationships, I would say, when I was a kid, because my parents got divorced. It was fairly acrimonious. And I was a person who was very concerned with like privacy and not sharing myself with anyone. And you can draw a pretty direct line again from the moment I stepped into that street and this album and this mindset shift to me coming to understand that what mattered in a relationship wasn't like, is this cool or is this like sexy and fun, or is it like, healthy, and is this person a person I love and want to share myself with? And a couple years after this, I quit the job and moved to LA to move in with my then girlfriend, who's now been my wife for 20 years. None of that is possible without that. I mean, obviously, it wasn't just Ghost by Neutral Milk Hotel that did this, and it wasn't just therapy, and it wasn't just me figuring out my life as a writer. It was all of these things and more, but it was the shift from being like, what's cool to like what's healthy and what's filled with love instead of what's filled with like witty witticisms.
It's time for a quick break. When we come back, a minor car crash sends Mike spiraling into a crash course on ethics. Stay with us. Hey everyone, I want to recommend a podcast. Hard Knocks is a show about resilience, self-discovery, and finding meaning after chaos, hosted by Amanda Knox. Each week, Amanda sits down with fascinating guests, writers, thinkers, artists, to explore how we learn, grow, and rebuild ourselves after life knocks us down. Amanda brings humor, honesty, and hard-earned perspective to every conversation, drawing on her own experience of being wrongfully convicted and rebuilding her life. Amanda was a guest on Life in 7 Songs in one of our most moving episodes, opening up about how music became a lifeline during her years of wrongful imprisonment. On our show, she spoke candidly about turning pain into wisdom and also about how we're all so much more than our worst moments. If you liked that episode, you'll love her show, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
I'm Jesse Alejandro Cottrell.
And I'm Emily Dreyfus, and this is Pacific Standard Time.
We have stories from all over the state of California, all the big battles that are happening here.
Prop 50,
housing affordability,
tech,
and immigration.
And we're really excited to bring you the stories about how California is dealing with what it means to be alive in 2025.
Subscribe to Pacific Standard Time, a new weekly show from the San Francisco Standard.
We'll have new episodes every Wednesday starting November 19th, wherever you get your podcasts.
I want to take us to your next song, which is Key to the Highway, specifically the version performed by Derek and the Dominoes. So what's the story behind this one?
So I got really obsessed with Eric Clapton. He was my favorite guitarist. And on the Layla album is this song, Key to the Highway. And it's a really cool song because it's like a 12-minute long jam. It fades in at the beginning because they just started jamming and some engineer was like, hit record quick. And then so they just hit record and they just played for like 12 minutes. And I was like, this song rules.
I got the key to the highway. Get down and find the road. Leave hell drunk. Walking his nose too slow.
I remember thinking like, my favorite song right now is Key to the Highway by Derek and the Dominoes. And I remember reading the liner notes, and it says, Key to the Highway, written by Big Bill Brunsey and Little Walter. And I was like, what? Those guys aren't in Derek and the Dominoes. Who the hell is Big Bill Brunsey? And I started poking around and learning that these songs that I was obsessed with at the time were not written by Eric Clapton or Derek and the Dominoes. It was almost like a Usual Suspects ending, right? Where I started going back and looking at all these blues songs that I loved and seeing that they were written by Robert Johnson or, Howlin' Wolf or Muddy Waters or something. And then I came to understand that those guys had written these songs in the 30s and 40s and 50s and that they had been appropriated, let's say, if not outright stolen by white artists. And I just remember being like, well, that's not fair. Why am I not listening to their versions? And then I started buying their versions and actually educating myself in the history of the blues. It was this weird, unpleasant lesson in the way that the culture has unfolded in this country over the last 200 years, which is just like people don't get credit for things. And that, this is not the main point here, but credit is really, really important to writers. It is a real bummer when people write things and don't get credit for them. It happens all the time. It happens in movies, happens in TV shows. It happens everywhere. This is where I learned that lesson about ethics at some level, but really about writing too.
One thing I think that sets you apart from most comedians is your deep interest in moral philosophy or ethics. Is there a story behind how you got interested in that?
There is. I'll try to give you the short version. 2005, my wife got into a minor fender bender with a guy literally like going half a mile an hour in traffic. Cop looked everything over. I don't see any damage here. They exchanged information, went on their way. Then we got a bill in the mail. The guy said he needed to have his whole fender replaced, and it was $836 or something. And I got really upset. And I said to the guy, I went and looked at the car, and there was a very, very, very faint line on his bumper. And I said, man, this is why insurance rates are so high. And Hurricane Katrina had just hit New Orleans. And I said, how about I give $836 to the Red Cross in your name and we call it even? And he sort of said, I'll think it over. I was on the show The Office at the time. I started complaining about what was happening. And other people started saying, I'll pledge another $100. I'll pledge $250 or whatever. Ooh. So I get excited about this. Started a blog and I told the whole story. And I was like, this guy's a real piece of work and he's not doing the blah, 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 complaining about him. People start pledging money, $10, $5, $50, $100. In 24 hours, I had more than $25,000 pledged to the Red Cross if the guy wouldn't fix his car. And suddenly I got this terrible, sickening feeling in my stomach of like, this is wrong. I don't know why, but this is wrong. I'm doing something bad, but I didn't know why. So I literally sat down on my computer and Googled like, what is ethics? Why am I wrong? And I found a bunch of professors and I sent them emails and was just like, will you talk to me? I need to talk to someone. I was like, I was having a crisis of conscience and I needed some Sherpas to help me navigate it. So I had like 5 deep conversations with different philosophy professors all around the country. They were like, well, you should read this. You should read Aristotle. You should read Kant. And I came to understand what I was doing that was bad and wrong.
Because it does feel murky what you did. How do we explain why that isn't okay?
Well, it depends on which philosopher you want to talk about, right? Like the basic way I would describe how I was wrong was to say that, look, part of being alive on Earth is engaging in a number of negotiations with other people, right? You have to share space on a subway. You have to wait in line at a bakery when you're trying to get a muffin. And if you were allowed to drag in completely unrelated circumstances that are much more important than those tiny negotiations, nothing would ever get done. If you borrowed $5 from your friend and your friend said, hey, do you have that $5 you owe me? And you said, how can you care about $5 when people are starving in West Africa?
Right.
That's not fair. That's an asymmetrical response to a very minor negotiation. And so my wife bumped into someone and caused a small amount of damage to his car. And then I made him feel bad about that because of Hurricane Katrina. Like, that's not fair. That's not fair. He has nothing to do with Hurricane Katrina. And it just sent me careening into this world of like trying to understand why certain choices are better or worse than others. It was a long, slow journey that came out of a very minor fender bender. And that's where The Good Place came from. I was like, I think there's a TV show in this. I think there's a show in people trying to be better.
Well, your next song is connected to The Good Place, so let's go there. It's Arvo Pärt's Spiegel im Spiegel.
So my wife is also a writer, and she and I have very different writing styles and also routines. And she does this thing where she goes on, Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, and she pokes around and just samples a bunch of songs until she finds one that she thinks sort of matches the mood or the tone or the style of the thing that she's trying to write. And I've never understood that. I write differently. I usually put on a baseball game or a basketball game in the background just to sort of has some like white noise. And I was writing the finale of The Good Place, which I don't know if it's the most important show I've ever written because they're all important in different ways. But The Good Place was really personal. And the finale was going to be this gigantic thing where, suppose I should say spoiler alert, essentially all of the characters in the show die. It's a little misleading to say that because when the show starts, they've already died. But they are all moving on into some other part of existence. And I was like, man, this is really sad. This is really, really sad. And I didn't want it to leave people feeling just purely sad. I wanted it to also be funny. And I was tweaking a little bit in how to land the plane. And my wife said, you should do the thing that I do. What you need is a piece of music that can kind of like stay with you and fill you with the right vibe. And I had bought in college, I think, I had bought this album by Arvo Pärt, and I heard this song. And I just immediately was like, yep, this is the one. This is the song. This is the mood. And so I started listening to it as I wrote the finale. And I listened to it on repeat probably 8 or 10 hours a day, every day for a solid week. I would write for a couple hours and I would take a break and I would go walk. And when I did, I put in my AirPods and I kept listening to it. Like I literally never stopped. There's something about it. It's so spare and so beautiful, but it also, I don't know how it accomplishes this, but it fills you with hope. And that was what I wanted the finale to do. The most important scene in the finale is a scene where the characters, Eleanor and Chidi, who are a sort of epic love story, are saying goodbye to each other. And I just was like, oh, this is what's playing. This is the song that's playing in that moment.
There's one conception of death for a Buddhist. The wave returns to the ocean, where it came from, and where it's supposed to be.
Not bad, Buddhists.
Not bad. None of this is bad.
I just love how that turned out. Everything about it is right.
Do you think the story might have ended differently if you'd been listening to a different song?
If I'd been listening to Enter Sandman by Metallica.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's one of those magical things. And again, I credit my wife for this, is like one thing that music can do, if used correctly, is just it can enhance a story or even tell a story better than any words that you can write.
Your last song is Taylor Swift's Gold Rush. How come?
So have a 15-year-old daughter. So Taylor Swift had been very present in my house for a very long time. And my relationship to Taylor Swift had been like, she's got good songs. You know, like hey, songs are fun. I like her songs. And I defended her. I thought, like, what an impressive person. Then COVID hit. All writers' rooms moved to Zoom, and we were all sort of isolated. And I remember kind of feeling a little sorry for myself because TV comedy writing is essentially a communal experience. It felt like we were being robbed of our ability to do the thing we love. And it's not like we were unique in that. Everyone was robbed of the ability to do whatever they loved. And I was just lamenting that fact. And then this album came out, and I was like, what a crybaby I am. Like, here's Taylor Swift. Over COVID, she released 2 albums in like 6 months. And this song in particular, which I immediately loved just as a song, it's an imagination song. In the first part of the song, she's at a party or a dinner or something, and she sees this guy and goes on this imaginative journey of how their life is going to play out. They're going to hit it off, and they're going to like fall in love, and they're going to take a vacation together, and they're going to walk around a town, and people in the town are going to be like, who are those two? And then she snaps back to reality, and she says, I don't like how everyone is looking at this guy. I don't like that he's captivating everyone in this room. The title is about like, it feels like a gold rush. Everyone's rushing to this dude. And the second verse is her erasing all of the first verse.
Everybody wants you, but I don't like a gold rush. What must it be like to grow up that beautiful, with your hair falling into place like dominoes? My mind turns your life into folklore. I can't dare to dream.
And it's an artist at the height of her powers using her imagination because there's no other tool available. And I remember thinking like, thank you, Taylor Swift. Like, you have reminded me that the process of writing can be an imaginative journey. You know, she didn't intend this, but it was a very meaningful message in a bottle that washed up on my particular shore. And I am very grateful to her for that.
I think you emailed us and you said your takeaway was quit whining and get back to work.
Yeah, quit whining, man. Yeah, this sucks. It sucks less for you than it does for nearly everyone else on earth. So stop whining and get back to work. That's exactly how I felt when I heard it.
And you did get back to work, so it seems like it worked, right?
Yeah, yes.
Your next big project was A Man on the Inside. This is a show that deals with aging, memory loss, loneliness, death. In other words, more comedy gold.
Yeah, that came out of COVID, and it stars Ted Danson, who obviously I had worked with on The Good Place. But yeah, I did. I got back to work, and now the second season of that show is coming out.
Obviously, your career is far from over, but looking holistically at your contributions to TV so far, what do you hope people take away from spending time with your characters and the worlds that you create?
I never want to try to direct anyone to experience any piece of art in any specific way. I think it's very personal, the way that people take in TV shows and movies and music. But there's a quote, another David Foster Wallace quote that I love about, I'm going to get some of the details wrong here, but he had written a negative review about American Psycho, the Bret Easton Ellis book. And an interviewer said, like, why don't you like his work? And he said, well, you know, if we live in a world that's sort of dark and sad and awful and stupid and miserable, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to write a piece of art that points out that the world is dark and brutal and awful and miserable. Like, you don't need a book to tell you that. Given that the world is dark and brutal and awful and miserable and stupid, what is a path through that world that I can prescribe that might lead to a little more hope and beauty? That was his goal as a writer, and I feel like I sort of adopted that same goal. I try to write things that say, this is a bleak situation we're all in. What is a way that we can navigate within that situation to maybe make the world a little less bleak or awful? In Parks and Rec, it was about existing in the world of civic engagement, and obviously The Good Place is very directly about that. Man on the Inside begins with a man who's sort of grieving the loss of his wife of 50 years, and his world is getting very small, and he takes a sort of a leap of faith that maybe by getting out of his house and engaging with other people and engaging with the world, he might become a little happier or feel more useful. That's not always the message of everything I write, but that's the philosophy that I try to follow, is to say, like, I'm going to try to let you, the audience, know what I think one way to improve things might be.
Was there anything you learned about yourself going through this exercise of picking 7 songs?
Yeah, honestly, when you sent me instructions, and the instructions included, don't just pick songs you like, which is obviously very obvious. Of course, you shouldn't just pick 7 songs you like. This is not a podcast called 7 Songs You Like. But when I started thinking, like, is this a song that formed me as a person, or is this just a song I like? What was left were 7 songs that really kind of informed my career as a writer. That was not the intention. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, it happened very organically. So you should start another podcast called 7 Songs That I Like, and then I'll come back on and talk about that.
Mike Schrute, thank you so much for taking the time.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Life in 7 Songs is a production from the San Francisco Standard. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to go back and listen to my interview with Cord Jefferson, another brilliant screenwriter who balances big laughs with big feelings. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and review the show. It makes a big difference for us. Senior producer is Jasmine Morris. Our producers are Michelle Land. She also mixes the show, and Tessa Kramer. Theme music by Kate Davis and Zubin Hensler. Jess Hutchison created our show art. Our music consultant is Sarah Timbekshian. As always, you can find this guest's full playlist at sf.news/Spotify. I'm Sophie Behrman. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next week.